Hi, welcome to Neuroverse, a podcast hosted by Carolina
and Clara, where we discuss all matters from neuroscience to philosophy and beyond.
Welcome back to Neuroverse, and welcome to our final episode of the year.
We're doing a little bit of a different style to our usual, I guess, in that we're just going to be chatting about how we found the year and our favorite highlights of a full another year, second year at Neuroverse.
Yeah.
Being Neuroverse. Yeah.
Yeah, we did a similar one last year, and I think we really enjoyed it, just reminiscing about like different highlights and lowlights across the year, and it's really exciting. Like, I feel like we've come a long way, we've achieved a lot, and I've loved so many of the topics that we've done, and I'm really excited for next year and what's gonna come.
Yeah. And it's so crazy how much we've grown this year because we've doubled our listeners and more than doubled our followers and number of streams, which is, crazy because it has been pretty much exponential. And I want to say thank you so much to all of the listeners who've been here, especially those of you who've been here around since the beginning when we were very, very much amateurs.
Yeah.
But hopefully the quality of the podcast is also improving as we're becoming more familiar with how to do things in the podcast world.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's crazy looking back at like our first few episodes. I feel like we sound like such kids.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that like the quality has gotten a bit better, and I'm sure in a year's time we'll be feeling the exact same way today as we feel now about a year ago.
Yeah. Okay, so let's jump right into some reflection about the episodes we've done. Like, I feel like this year, as last year equally, we've had a really big range of topics. I mean, we always wanted Neuroverse to be like a mix of science and philosophy and everything in between.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's really fun to just get to choose our own topics. So what would you say are some of your favorite topics from the year?
So I think I've got 9 favorite episodes.
Oh my gosh. Wait, how many have we even published this year? Like,
our first episode was number 40, and we've just published number 65. So that's 25 episodes. Okay, so yeah, like half of them are my favorites. Okay, so the first one that came out in the year was Philosophy of Color, and I loved that episode. For me, that was the perfect mix of neuroscience and philosophy, because of course there's so much like epistemology that you can talk about it, which is one of my favorite topics, but then it's also really ties into like the biology and like whether or not we are a vessel for color, and I really like the mix between the two. I also enjoyed Criticality with Dominic a lot. I think he explained the analogies really well, and it was really interesting to learn about basically the physics of the brain, but in a different way from what I'm used to thinking about it. Like, in terms of electrophysiology and patching, like, yes, it's biophysics, but this felt even more like physicsy and like theoretical, and that was kind of quite cool. It reminded me, it was on a similar level as like Lisa's episode last year of like understanding the brain through physics, and it just felt a bit like that. And then I really liked Inequality in Women's Health and Research with Anais Kruger-Ruiz. I think it's so important to highlight the inequality, and you know, I was thinking, an article came out today and it was just pointing out how little progress we've made in terms of bridging this gap, and it's something that I'm so passionate about, and I really feel like if I wasn't researching neuroscience, this would be a field that I would be contributing to, and I'm really hoping more people will contribute to this field and more research goes into this field. And then I really enjoyed The Blob, Questioning Intelligence. That was such a fun episode that we did on slime mold, and we looked at intelligence in different perspectives and scales, and yeah, what is intelligence, and can this blob that can solve puzzles can we really call that intelligence? And this ties into another episode, Animal Models in Neuroscience, and so just an appreciation for different models and different ways of researching science. And it was such a fun episode, and I really like these episodes that we like deep dive into things that are either unrelated to neuroscience or unrelated to our specific field. And then predictive processes and flexible behavior with Sonia Hoffer. That was a highlight for me, not only because I was interviewing my old boss and talking about predictive coding, but also, yeah, because she's such an inspiration for me. And I'm so glad that this is exactly like what the podcast for me is about, being able to share these incredible voices with everyone and everyone to be able to have access to such insight and incredible researchers.
And that was our top played episode this year, so I guess the listeners really enjoyed that too. And I think it was nice to have a real expert from the field just talk about the research.
Exactly, yeah. So the next one that I really liked was stress, cortisol, and how to overcome stressors. Stress is something that I think we all do struggle with, so it was so insightful to be able to do an episode on that and try to work towards being less stressed.
Yeah, and this was the first ever episode where the topic was decided by one of you guys. So we did a questionnaire on Instagram for topic suggestions, and it was a topic suggested by one of you. And for me, that was really cool because even though it did happen to be a topic that I also find very interesting, but we maybe wouldn't have done it otherwise. And yeah, we are planning on having more questionnaires in the future on our social media, so watch out on our Instagram and Twitter, because we really want to get more input from all of you about what you want to hear us talk about. And we're pretty much open to talking about everything. Exactly. Or anything.
Yeah, exactly. And just to finish up, so another one that I liked was biomimetic and bio-inspired material and designing generative models. Both of these fields are very outside of my comfort zone, but I love deep diving into these different topics. And so, yeah, I just thought I'd put out there my favorite episodes. These are the ones that I tend to recommend to people when they're like, oh, if you could only like recommend one episode out of the ones that you've done this year, it's usually one of these.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I have a couple things as well. I think my top episode, I only have one because it's the top one, was The Science of Awe. And that was my favorite one to both prepare for and record because it's a topic very close to my heart. I had always thought about it, but I had never framed it in the way that I did until I kind of made it a podcast episode and actually went to then read some scientific papers about the psychology, essentially, of the feeling of awe and how it can shape our lives. And it felt really interesting to have that double perspective of like a personal experience and then learning about the scientific studies that have been done and how they also prove through science in an empirical way how these feelings can affect our behavior and our mindsets and our lives. And so yeah, that one like really impacted me the most personally, so I would call it my top. But I also really liked that this year I feel like I had the opportunity to express a bit more about the science side of me, like what my research interests actually are. For example, we had an episode on synapses, which I love, and the origin and evolution of synapses. And I've been waiting to do a synapse episode forever, so I was really happy with that one. And also, we've started a new collaboration with Scientifica, which I'm also super excited about because it will be a series called Tools for Looking into the Brain. And this year, we've only recorded and released our first episode of that series, which was on patch clamp techniques, which is a type of electrophysiology, and my absolute love in terms of scientific methodology. So it was so nice to get to kind of talk about these things that I think about in my little science world, but Neuroverse tends to be where I let out my philosophy and discussional passions. But yeah, it was nice to merge those two at some points in the year. And I also wanted to talk about, as we did last year, like I found it interesting last year and this year that there's always a couple of major themes that emerge throughout our episodes because we always try to link together ideas and it always ends up being these kind of underlying themes. So last year what we had, which continues and will always continue to emerge in our discussions, is structure-function relationships.
Yeah.
Because it just seems to be related to everything in life, no matter what scale we're talking about, what
problem we're trying to address.
Yeah, like every topic.
Yeah.
But this year, another like major theme that I feel emerged is the relationship between spatial and temporal resolution. And this was especially apparent in that episode, Measuring the Brain in Space and Time, where we spoke about neuroimaging methods and electrophysiological methods, and how neuroimaging methods prioritize spatial resolution and looking at things across space, whereas electrophysiology prioritizes temporal resolution and looking at things across time scales.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And since that episode, I've also been so aware of like thinking about things in terms of time and space, and like especially how time is chronological and how, I don't know, like it matters so much, and it has this like one dimensionality aspect that like space doesn't.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Yeah, exactly. It's nice that I feel every episode actually personally impacts me and my thinking, and both of us, and then in the future episodes it like comes up again.
Yeah.
And another major theme is like reflecting on our sensory worlds. So especially with the philosophical episodes, the philosophy of color, of course, questioning what really is color, and then our episode on reality and whether or not we hallucinate our realities, linking of course to predictive coding, which is like another major topic we always mention since literally our third episode, because I think that was the one on predictive coding.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then also you can get excited about an upcoming episode in the new year in 2024, which will be, drumroll, the philosophy of sound.
Woo!
And I was really, really excited about this one because it was heavily linked to the philosophy of color.
Yeah, I like how we start the year with the same theme. Next year we have to do like the philosophy of taste or something. Yeah, touch.
Yeah, or taste.
Touch is more interesting.
Yeah. Which we may or may not have touched upon in the philosophy of sound episode.
Yeah.
And yeah, all of these episodes kind of are us reflecting on what is our sensory experience and how does it shape our reality or define our reality, and what can we gather about what reality is based on our sensory experiences, which to me is one of the top questions,
of course,
of life.
Yeah.
And yeah, also you mentioned an Anaisis episode on gender equality in healthcare, and we also did an episode with Meredith Gibson, the CEO of the American Women in Science Association, which was cool to have these insights. It was for International Women's Day as well, so we got to celebrate International Women's Day and International Day for Girls and Women in Science.
Yeah.
Cool. With talking to somebody who had a lot of experience working in this field, pushing forward gender equality, which of course for us as women in science and female podcasters, which is not very common.
20% of podcast hosts are female. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're proud to represent the 20%.
One more voice in the void.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, and you also mentioned biomimetics. I really loved this episode because what was it that you said you would be studying? Oh, you said you would study like gender equality if it wasn't for neuroscience. Yeah, so I feel like I would want to be studying material science and specifically biomaterials if I wasn't in neuroscience. And so that episode was super interesting for me because I love to at least dabble in how that field is making an impact in the world and what new technologies there are and possibilities there are to come up with biomaterials for optimizing our technologies and lives. Yeah,
it is fascinating.
Yeah. Also, the episode on storing data in DNA.
That was cool.
Yeah, it was like, I just came across this in an article like a Netflix show. And I just love coming across things really randomly and just realizing I can make this into a whole podcast episode.
Yeah.
I felt like after that, I couldn't believe I had never known about this. Like, it seems so obvious now. But, yeah.
Yeah, that was a similar situation with me on biomimetics. And, yeah, you're right. It is so fun to have things in our day-to-day lives that, like, trigger our inspiration to do a whole episode. Like, when we did an episode that we talked about the Pierre Mondrian and Hilma Klint installation.
Well, that was when it was the episode on reality, and I had just been to this exhibition.
Yeah.
And so it was like all I wanted to talk about at the time. And then I think I recommended it to you as well.
Yeah, and I went and it was beautiful.
Yeah. And also the DNA data storage one. Like a couple weeks later, I was at the Science Art Gallery at London Bridge, and there was an exhibition on AI. And randomly there was this one piece of art that was just a set up area where they were carrying out DNA sequencing and then storing data in the DNA. And I was just looking at it like, this is crazy. Like, this is exactly what we just recorded the episode on.
Yeah.
And I got so excited. I love going to museums and seeing things we've talked about in Neuroverse and just getting really excited about it.
Yeah.
Because I feel now personally connected to all these ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, like, what a privilege to get to talk about all these things that we're not experts in, but just because we have this platform and find it interesting and have access to papers about it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I did biochemistry for my undergrad, so I feel like that gave me a good enough on the biomimetics field, but of course I'm not an expert. And yeah, maybe we'll get an expert on soon enough.
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
And that's another thing. We got to speak to so many different experts and guest speakers this year. Also, another major theme because of that was artificial intelligence and particularly generative AI.
Totally unrelated to ChatGPT coming out this year.
So we also, got a lot of guest speakers from the Sainsbury Wellcome Centre, part of UCL, talking about their research on AI, like Clementine Domine, Jay Bagat, and Pierre Glaser. And yeah, it was really nice to get to chat to SWC people as part of our new public engagement grant from the SWC. And they taught me a lot about machine learning and AI, which I still feel like I will never understand as many times as I hear about it, but it's really nice to hear about.
Yeah, I think Pierre did such a good job at like explaining it in layman's terms.
Yeah, he did really top off the year by finally giving me a grounded expation.
Yeah.
I just may need to like listen back to his
a few times. Yeah,
a few times.
Same. And I like that like both Jay and Clementine, they brought in like the experimental side of things as well. Like they seemed quite balanced in both ways.
I really appreciated that each one offered a really different perspective on AI, because Clementine's was much more about how AI is related to how the brain works, like whether neuroscience inspired AI or AI inspires neuroscience or something else. Listen to find out more. And then Jay's episode was, as you said, a lot more about like big data and how it should be handled and how it can be used efficiently through collaborations, and also how experimental data can work in collaboration with machine learning data analysis. And Pierre's episode was very much like a hardcore, like,
machine
what
learning,
is generative AI? Like, how are the models made? Where do they come from? And also besides all of these kind of higher order or higher level, like, scales of thinking, we also had some hardcore protein biologists on, which was nice for the both of us. I think that's more resonating with our backgrounds. And so we had Estella Newcomb talk about protein dysfunction in neurodegeneration, which was a really good perspective on how the changes at the protein structure level can contribute to human diseases, and why it's also important to look at that micro scale. And then we had Alice Petty talking about the neurobiology of schizophrenia and how we have animal models for schizophrenia and why they are useful. And then finally we had Sydney Lehman talking about reprogramming cells and how we can turn glia cells, which are in the brain, into neurons, and how this has potential as a regenerative therapy.
Yeah, and we also had a really interesting conversation with Alex Gomez-Marin, and the title of the episode is literally In Conversation. It was a very insightful discussion on neuroscience and the future of neuroscience and how to do science.
I think that was one of our most unique guest episodes ever because Alex is an amazing thinker. Yeah, an amazing thinker. And he just had so many insights to share with us. And I feel like the conversation just genuinely flowed. I mean, we had like no plan.
Yeah.
And which was kind of terrifying in the beginning because we usually have just a loose plan, but it still helps. And then it turned out to be a fascinating conversation about, everything you mentioned. And that was really special. And we also had an episode on science communication with Elodie Chabrol, who is an amazing science communicator with so much experience. She leads the Pint of Science Festival around the UK and France and all over Europe and the world, I think. And as science communicators, it was both a learning experience for us, but also just really insightful into what motivated her to pursue science communication coming from a background in academia.
Yeah, and with that, I think, I just want to say a big thank you to all of our guests. They brought so much knowledge to our episodes, and we hope that you enjoy them. We have plenty more exciting guests lined up for 2023. 2024. Sorry. Yeah, you'll just have to wait and find out who they are.
And also I want to say thank you again to one of our original collaborators, I would call them, from back in 2022. Tact.
Yeah, we met at a neuroscience conference.
Yes, and is composed of Tyler Kaufman and Adele Tilouin. And they are a science art duo who we did an episode with as well, which is also one of my top episodes of all time.
Yeah, definitely.
But they very kindly continued to support us and provided a little bit of music, which we've used in our new intro that we started doing like halfway through the year.
Yeah.
And also in our trailer. And on the topic of science art, we also launched our very first and potentially the first of more to come, science art competition.
It's open now. You can send in your submissions to our email, neuroverse.cc@gmail.com. But we also have a Google Docs that lists out all of the information to submit your artwork. And the winning entry will be featured on our merchandise, which will come out around February time next year. Give us your art submissions, and you can be an artist, a scientist, just like to draw for fun.
We're very happy that many of you have already submitted some amazing pieces of art. So don't miss your chance to join in the competition. And
And the runner-up and both the winner do also get a cash prize. So check that out for the details. So there was something else that I also wanted to put out there. On the 14th of February is our Neuroverse second year anniversary, and we were thinking for that episode to do a little Q&A. So on our Instagram post or via email or on the website, if you have any questions that you'd like us to answer, if you'd like to know anything about us, please put out these questions, and we will spend a portion of the episode answering your questions. That can be anything related to Neuroverse itself, but also if you're curious about like our career paths and what it's like to be a neuroscientist, and we'd love to hear your questions.
Yeah, and I just really do enjoy getting other people involved in defining the path of Neuroverse and creating a community where we can like be curious, and that was always the point of Neuroverse.
Exactly.
So, yeah, looking forward to the Q&A. Again, we're really trying to like branch out with the styles of our episodes. I feel like we don't have that much of a defined style because every time we have a guest speaker, it kind of changes, and we have like episodes like these, which is like a reflection kind of.
And we also have so many new collaborators, and we've been lucky to be awarded a few more grants. Recently, we got a grant from the Biochemical Society in the UK, which is super exciting. So you'll see more biochemistry episodes. And I was thinking, we did an episode that was a debate on oxygen last year, and I was thinking maybe that would be a fun format to have again.
Oh yeah, that was definitely one of the most fun ones to record. yeah, if you have any suggestions
on debate topics you'd like to see Clara and I do,
yeah,
we'd be very up for it.
Yeah, because I was totally not prepared for that. I mean, like, I was prepared after I prepared for it, but when you pitched the idea,
yeah,
I was like, okay, fine, I'll argue for this seemingly simple perspective, and little did I know there was so much more to it. Yeah, so it'll be really fun to do another.
And yeah, I mean, as we've mentioned before, Neuroverse, it came from a place of wanting to create a podcast that was something that I wanted to listen to, and I felt there was a gap in the market for this type of content in terms of neuroscience at this type of level. And it's so meaningful to me, like bringing the private public to the public, and anyone in the world can access it. And we're so grateful to everyone who listens and who shares and supports. It means so much to me when sometimes, like, people from the PhD cohort come up to me and are like, oh, I listened to this episode, I listened to that episode. So whether you're colleagues or friends or family or strangers, we're so grateful for every one of you, and especially your ideas. And I think that's something we'd love to hear more. It's ideas that you have for future topics, opinions that you have on episodes we've done, and yeah, just more two-way interactions.
I should also mention on the website there's a whole section for how to interact with the podcast, and there's information on how you can like submit topic suggestions, answer our questions on Spotify, which we usually have a question for every episode related to the episode, and yeah, some other things you can check out to get more involved. So head to our website, neuroversepod.com, to see more ways that you can get involved. So I think we'll end the episode of the end of the year here.
Yeah. Thank you for coming all along on this journey with us so far, and we hope to see you next year.
Yeah.